Hey, blessings everybody. I want to show you a picture and I want you to think about this picture. It has nothing to do with Russia. What it has to do is your life and asking yourself, is this paradise or is it not? If these things were removed, if you no longer had any access to these corporations or their products and the things that they sell or the things that entertain you and consume your life, how would you feel? Sad? Mad? Grieved? Depressed? Would you be down in your spirit? Or would you be happy and give God glory? Would you be thankful that this no longer is in our world anymore? That it's no longer in your nation? How would you feel? Nobody can answer that question for you, but think about Babylon. It's all the business, the consumerism, it's the trade, it's the commerce, it's the money, it's the luxury, it's the pompous desires, worldly ambitions, and lusts of the eyes and desires of the flesh. It's everything that entertains you and consumes your life and your lifestyle. And we may not even realize that some of these things are taken away from the presence of God. That so much of these things that consume our life in a consumerist world or nation that you may live in, how can we see God when everything is turned into a business? And these things are filling our hearts, souls, and minds. Now, I want you to think about this. He says you can only love God. You can't love the world and money and love God too. He needs to consume your heart 100%, not just 90%. You can't just give him 10% of your time. It makes sense. Even Daniel in Babylon, in the exile, what did he do? He served God, found time, did not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He went to Babylon in exile, same with Ezekiel and Daniel, but they did not bow down to foreign gods, nor the money or the riches or the politics that ruled the land. But those who did not want to obey God, and when he said to go to exile in Babylon, but guess what? Your heart, soul, and mind is not in Babylon. The people remain in Israel, in the land. Think about right now, their comforts and security, while others went to Egypt with the luxuries and the pleasures for their own security, trying to save their life. But he said sword, famine, and disaster would come. He says, this is the sins of your sister Sodom. They were haughty and proud. They did not aid the poor, the widows, and the orphans. They did not care. So as spiritually as it was physically, they turned a blind eye. Now it was haughtiness, it was pride, and it was careless ease. They were overfed. They had abundance. They had luxuries. They were consumed. Does this make sense? Now, before you get caught up in the politics, I want you to think about this for 1 minute. Look what he says in Revelation 16:13. And I saw coming out of the mouths of the dragon, out of the mouths of the beast, and out of the mouths of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits. There you go. It was 3 people. It's not just one. People are like, oh, there's Antichrist coming. Guys, this world is full of the Antichrist spirit. It's anti-God, period. It's false prophet spirit. These things are out in the world already. Look what he says. They're performing signs that go abroad to the kings of the whole world. What are those signs? Amazement. It's what consumes you. You'll be in amazement so that it's consuming you. Make sense? Who go abroad to the kings of the whole earth. They go to the kings of the whole earth. The whole world, to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. And he says, behold, I'm coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, stays alert, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and seen exposed. And he's going to gather the kings to the battle. And this is the time that we're in. It's coming here. We're almost to a time where eventually God's going to allow these kings to go to war with each other. But what did he say? Stay alert, stay awake, be looking for him. Hearts are not failing them for fear, but he says when they do fail for fear, look up. He says, do not be found naked, but you must be clothed in the garments of righteousness. What did happen in the Garden of Eden? By shame and guilt, they covered themselves with fig leaves, but make sure that you're not a cursed fig, that you're not a cursed tree, that you are bearing fruit, that you're clothed in the garments of righteousness, that you're repentant, that your shame and guilt is washed clean in the garments of righteousness, that you're repentant, you're humble, and you're patiently persevering in looking up and waiting for his coming, and steadfast in the firmness of God. And we got to know that we will be pressed. We will be persecuted. It's through the narrow gate will we come to the kingdom of God. And look what he says right here. I want to show you this. This is powerful. So I want to show you this right here. In Matthew 7:13-14, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Look what he says. Difficult. It's to press as grapes press hard upon. It's time to tread the grapes, he said. It's a compressed way, a narrow, straight, and contracted. It's to trouble, to afflict, and to distress. You'll go through troubles, afflictions, and distress. He says, don't think of it as some fiery ordeal that's coming upon you as some strange thing. And look at Hebrews 12. He's saying that you're going to go through these testings because look what God says. He disciplines those that he loves. And if he loves you, don't take it as God hates you or it's something strange. We must endure the discipline so that we may be purified and pressed. And so that when we're pressed, we're apart upon, that he can shape us and mold us into his image. By trouble, affliction, distress, and by many tribulation will you enter the kingdom of God. Many troubles in this life. It's not going to be simple, but narrow. Look what he says. Narrow is the way. The root word for there is, it's one who does not hesitate, does not waver. It's of quality to make firm and fix and to establish, to cause or make, to stand, to place, to put and set. It's to make you stand firm, to firmly fix and establish so that you're firmly rooted in the foundation and built upon the foundation of God in his word. It's in the presence of others, in the midst before judges. So you're already judged by God. In the midst of him, in front of him, through the narrowing, you are judged by God so that he can establish you, place you, and firmly root you and build upon his foundation. Now you think about Zion, what that means. It's basically a desolate place, barren. And how can he build right where the Dome of Rock sits? How can he build his foundation on that? Because it's a barren place. In the wilderness, it means desolate. Where you are, where it's desolate, where it's barren, wasteland, he can build his kingdom upon that. So where they used to tread grain is right in that place, the Dome of Rock, where the Holy of Holies sat. They would trade grain. So it's the separation of wheat and tare. So they would beat the grain. So you will be beaten in this life. So out of it, the wheat will come out. So they through the chaff, the tares up into the wind. But the wheat would fall into the foundation, the rock. And guess what God is saying? I will narrow you, firmly plant you so that you'll be fruitful. And then I'm going to build my foundation. And I say, I'll go and prepare a place for you. And if in my Father's house, there's many mansions. If there wasn't, I wouldn't have said so. I will go and prepare a place for you. You want to be rooted in God, but look what he says, the broad. It's a space lying between two places or limits, a region or a country or a tract of land. Think of that. A space lying between two places. You can't be on the fence. It's either all of God or the world. You can't be in the middle. It's right there. You have to choose a space line between two places, a broad place. There's no, you got to either be hot or cold. There's no lukewarmness. He says he would vomit you out of his mouth. Look what he says. The region surrounding a city or a village, the country. Now, if you think about the time of Yeshua, Jesus, during the first century, now what was going on in the country areas was a lot of times the close-knit communities that worked together amongst each other, cultivated their own lands. The women would took care of the children, sun up to sun down. They were working the fields and profiting off of what they did. They gleaned. Sometimes they were a lot more hungrier because there was things like famines that happened or poor crop production, things like that. So sometimes they went more hungry than others and had less and sometimes more. But then what happened when the Romans came in, Hellenistic times, during the times of Jesus, what happened? Guess what? People are distracted on business. So they started serving the system of the Romans, and the rich and the elite were growing wealthy. Does that make sense? So they're profiting off the people so that you're no longer close to your home and your family. You're more leaving your children and your husband, your wives. The husbands would go out, and even the single men, and they would work. And they're making the wealthy business and traders and those in commerce of the Romans rich. Now, you think about that. He says rural areas, regions surrounding a city or a village or the country. And people started, guess what? When you gravitated to a city, and that's usually what happened, you started working in the cities, that's where the business was. So that people were a lot more immoral, basically distracted and consumed. There's a lot more entertainment. So people started forsaking the old traditions and God's ways of family traditions, morals, and values, and godly morals, traditions, and values. Make sense? So even today in the cities, how much more liberal and immoral is it today? Versus just like the time of Yeshua, Jerusalem was in a lot of those Caesarea is a lot more entertainment, is a lot more evil, and not as many people that were close-knit community and family unit, if that makes sense. So look what he says. The region with towns and villages would surround a metropolis, a city. And so it's the broad way. And it's a land which is plowed or cultivated ground. Think about that. Where the gospel has gone out across the world, it's plowed or cultivated. The ground was plowed. It was cultivated with wheat. But now there is tares that grow up with that wheat, right? Now, what's very interesting, how many places throughout the world has the ground been cultivated and plowed and preparing for the harvest, to where people have heard the gospel, but they have turned away to another method, another way? And you think about that. Who is growing up to be wheat and who's growing up to be tares? That is the question. So the way to God is very narrow. And I want to leave you this. And then you remember, very few find it. I want to leave you this. In Revelation 17. An angel said to me, the waters that you saw in verse 15, where the prostitute's seat are the peoples, the multitudes, and the nations, and the languages. And look at that. You have, in Revelation 18, you have all the business, you have the trade, you have the commerce, you have everything. The merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power in her luxurious living. They have become haughty. Come out of her, my people, so that you will not partake in her sins and share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped as high as heaven. There is so much sin in this world. It's insane. And people are glorifying themselves and lived in luxury. And that's what he's saying. In their heart, I will see no grief. I will see no pain. I will see no suffering. But he says it will come in a single day by fire. And he says everything will be destroyed by fire. So what type of people should you be? Holy, righteous, and seeking God. Set apart for his coming. Don't be found naked. Don't be found, living life in Babylon and consumed with the consumerism of this life. Be set apart. Take pleasure in God and not the delicacies of the world. And don't let your soul long after the things in this world. Like here in verse 14, the fruit of which your soul longed for has gone from you, and all its delicacies and splendors are lost from you, never to be found again. So those things that can remain, he says, everything will be shaken in 2 Peter. And the things that can remain are the things of the Spirit. So think about these things. Look back and reflect on that picture. And I want you to think, is it paradise or is it not? You may work for some of these companies. You may, use some of their products, but is your heart, soul, and mind in the system, or is it removed? Are you on the narrow path, or are you on the broad? Are you in the narrow gate entering through it, or are you not sure? The question remains. Only you will know if you have that peace, if you have that grace, or if you followed another message. And, you will know if you are growing in the grace of God, that you're growing in the sanctification, in the peace that he said. And I want to leave it here. I want to leave you with this one right here. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Humble yourself. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself, his soul? But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. But whatever that is, it doesn't matter. Just contentment is something that we're all learning and striving for. Contentment has great value, great riches in the kingdom. And those that desire to be rich fall into many temptations, not only rich of self, but rich of things in this life. For all this world and all the desires of the flesh and desires of the eyes and pride of life and possessions is not of the Father, but is of the world. So in most of the quarrels that are going on in this world is the passions that war within us. It's jealousy. It's of others. It's worldly ambition. And we don't have because we don't ask for the right heart. And God will give you in abundance according to his will and his purpose. Let each of you not look at their own interests, but also the interests of others. Let's let our ambition be of the kingdom. And he says, let it be of peace. Let you be at peace and live a quiet life, seeking to glorify God and do good to each other. Do good unto others. So let's do that. Love each other, care for one another, and keep our eyes on the prize in the kingdom that's coming. Like Abraham left his, approximately 13-bedroom house to have a tent mind, live in tents, because he knew of a better kingdom that's coming. I'm not telling you to live in tents, but what I'm telling you to do is keep your eyes on the prize, heart, soul, and mind on the kingdom to come. Shalom, and God bless each one of you.